Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chefs and the Independent Restaurant, Building Back Better in Relationships with Small Farms and Producers. If you have any questions for our presenters today, feel free to drop those in the chat. I would love to welcome our moderator for this session, Michelle, to the stage to start us off.
Right, excellent.
Hello.
Hi, and thanks for the terrific introduction. I really appreciate it, and thanks to Greg and everybody at CIA Menus of Change for inviting me and my esteemed panelists to present today. I'm Michelle Nashan, a chef for over 35 years, but also the executive chairman and co-founder of Wholesome Wave, a nonprofit that helps people struggling with poverty, food, and nutrition insecurity throughout the country have affordable access to the fruits and vegetables they need to stay healthy through SNAP doubling in produce prescriptions. We use our programs to embed policy in things like the federal farm. I also am the founder of Wholesome Crave, a plant-based soup company that actually operates in scaled food service, supplying plant-based soups to folks like Google in Mountain View and UC Davis Healthcare, and then 5% of the proceeds from those sales of the folks in scaled food sector go back to Wholesome Wave to support that work, very much in the spirit of my late partner, the actor Paul Newman, who has Newman's Own and Newman's Own Foundation. The pandemic has been disruptive for us all, but perhaps especially for the independent restaurant sector, which I came from and know so well. Along with the local and regional supply chain partners like farmers and food hub distribution services that serve them. Today, we're going to explore the journey of this sector that set the original tone for what has become the local sustainable regenerative movement that is now creating change in the broader and more scaled food service sector, including the sector of many of those of you who are participating in this conference today. So I would love to introduce our panelists. I will start with the farmers and the food distributors. Marty Travis is a partner at Spence Farm in Fairbury, Illinois. He co-owns and operates it with his son, Will, who saw past the corn and soybean fields that they originally wandered onto into the kitchens of Chicago chefs looking for local, responsibly grown ingredients. Spence Farm is a thriving 60-acre biodiverse farm growing a variety of ancient grains, heirloom fruits, vegetables, and raising a number of heritage breed livestock, so fully integrated. Marty also runs Down at the Farms, farmer-to-farmer marketing and delivery service, representing more than 60 of Central Illinois' finest farms and getting that amazing farmers market quality food to restaurants like Rick's. Next panelist is Nick Martinelli. Is the founder and the CEO of Martys Local, a Western Massachusetts-based distribution business specializing in local and regional foods. Nick is a graduate of Williams, Suffolk University Law School, and the Farm School, which is an awesome venue. He previously worked as an attorney at Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick. Founded in 2016, the mission of Martys Local is to help rebuild regional food systems by linking area farmers and food producers with nearby growers, schools, colleges, restaurants, farm stores, and other institutions. And last, but by no means least, the one and only Rick Bayless. Most people know him from winning Top Chef's Masters, besting the world-class competitors with his authentic Mexican cuisine. I remember the tongue episode. It was awesome. He won numerous Beard Awards for his restaurants, for his books, also Emmy nominated, which is rare for chefs. He leads numerous well-celebrated restaurants ranging from Frontera Grill to Choco to Bar Sotano. He's also known for his amazing philanthropic work through the Frontera Pharma Foundation, supporting small Midwestern farms. To date, the foundation has awarded nearly $3 million to support this important sector of the local economy. Frontera Scholarship is a culinary scholarship that Rick has founded for Mexican-American students in Chicago, and he recently founded Impact Culinary Training on the city's disenfranchised West Side. Welcome all panelists, and let's begin the conversation. I'm going to ask a series of a few questions. The panelists are going to take a few minutes to take a crack at each. What I'd love to do is if we could start off, maybe Rick with you first, and then Marty and Nick, briefly share kind of your initial reaction to the pandemic once it was clear that the shutdown would be lasting.
Yeah, that was mostly just fear, I think, because we never really shut down our restaurants. We kept, we had one restaurant that did a lot of to-go, and so we just, all of us focused on that one restaurant for a little time being. But I will say that just fear was in everybody's eyes, and we tried to figure out, could we make something work here? And my first fear was for our staff, especially the hourly staff, because I know that these are the people that live pretty much paycheck to paycheck. They didn't have reservoirs and of cash to go to tide them over for several months, which turned into obviously more than a year. And I was really very much concerned about how we could at least get some food on their tables. And so we started a big program just out of fear for those people to make sure that all of our staff had food, and then a lot of other restaurants in Chicago. So over the first 12 weeks of that shutdown, we supplied 150,000 meals to people. Real quickly, we began to, I had a lot to say grace over, but I began to think about all the people like Marty Travis and Greg Gunthorpe and the other people that were in our sphere. And we went from buying massive amounts of stuff from them to buying almost nothing and worrying about what are they going to do, because they're growing pigs and they're growing chickens and they've got crops in the field. This was in March.
Hence the subject of the panel.
Absolutely. And so it was I will say that it was one of the hardest things in my entire life, because I felt like my sphere of influence, both from our staff's perspective and from the people we bought from that are part of our family here, it was just constantly worrying about how people were going to make it.
Yeah. So fear, an odd combination of fear and awe, it sounds like.
Fear and awe. That's a great way to put
it. Marty, how about you as a farmer? A farmer and a distributor.
So we had that moment of fear. My son and I will. We had so many of our farmers calling and saying, so do you want to plant anything this year? Do you want us to scale? We don't know what to do. I said, no, just keep planting. We will figure it out. And so we pivoted, doing a lot of individual families, but a lot of those individual families happened to be the cooks that we were supplying through their restaurants. And that, honestly, we still supply a lot of those folks even today. But I have to say, on our side, observing what was happening with our chef friends, we could hear and see the fear in their voice, eyes, of what they were up against too. And it was heartbreaking because they were able to do the things that they're used to doing in the way that they were doing them. And while everybody was still making the best of a poor situation, I felt like we all became to each other as individuals and supportive, even if it was just a simple call or just an extra email, and just if we had extra things to drop by for their staff. That was how we dealt with the moment of fear on our side, but also the reach out on the other side.
So it sounds like a combination of fear, take risk, keep planning stuff, and empathy. And both sides, both from Rick and and from you. And Nick, how about you as a distributor who works right in the middle of all of this?
Yeah, we had a very similar starting point where we modeled some shutdown scenarios within the first, 3 or 4 days after we had seen the shutdown order, and we modeled some scenarios that look like, well, what if we're going to be at half capacity? What if we're going to be at a quarter? What if we're going to be at zero? And we didn't really have a lot of time. Fortunately, we were lucky. We didn't have a lot of time to worry about that, because very quickly, within the first 10 days or so, we service probably 15 to 20 farm stores across the region, all of whom wanted to sell the products from one another. And the sales to those customers started to really shoot up, and the traffic that those customers were seeing started to shoot up. And so they needed more products from the other farms in the region. And so we were very fortunate. And like Marty was saying, we were having those phone calls or emails with both customers and with our farm partners, just those extra, reaching out that how's it going, and are you okay, and what are you seeing, and what are you thinking, and that was all of that kind of attitude and that empathy that started very early on was very critical and helpful for us.
Yeah. So it's almost like your initial reaction was plan for the worst and then surprise. Yeah,
that's
right.
That we did particular.
Yeah. So I think, that obviously everybody, we all had to pivot. A key pivot for Wholesome Wave was, Black Lives Matter followed right on after the pandemic. And we saw a lot of donor flight, where donors started moving to correctly and about time to racial and policing justice issues and things like that. But then there was this incredible demand for our programs because of the incredible food, nutrition, and security. We were able to pivot to some pretty large distributions that were untypical for us. So we saw the same thing. So I'm guessing each of you had a key pivot that you can share that also might have been a little bit of a surprise for you. Rick, do you want to start that off?
Well, our it's kind of funny because I'm not a to-go person, and we were only able to be a to-go restaurant for quite a while, and we had never done to-go in Frontera at all. But our learning was that, when you put a group of dedicated people together in a room and say you have to figure something out, they do. And that it's not necessarily one person that is the brilliant one that comes up with the ideas. It's the group effort that comes up with the ideas. And so we all just sat down and said, okay, well, what would Frontera to go look like? And in this time when you're thinking about families eating together, probably more than they've ever eaten before together, what would they want from Frontera? And coming up with stuff that was really incredibly popular. And so for us, it was thinking about, we had always said that we didn't do to go because we had a very lively business just in the restaurants, and we didn't want to do anything that would cause any problems with the indoor business. But now that we were not doing the indoor business, we imagined, and we had also said all along the way that our food doesn't travel well. Well, can we come up with food that is ours and that would travel well? And I will say that this is the thing that we learned the most, because it's quite different than what Nick and Marty were experiencing in all of this. But people come to our restaurant not just because they're hungry. They come to our restaurant because they want the experience of coming to our restaurant. They want to hear the music. They want to be welcomed in with a smile. And I said, we can't just put food in a box and hand it through a doorway to people, because that's not who we are as a restaurant. So we came up right away with the ideas of like creating playlists that people could put on while they're eating our food, so that you would have some sense of that. On the back of the little welcome, like I wanted to be able to make sure that when people got their food at home, that they felt like we were welcoming them to enjoy this food like we do in our restaurants. And so I wrote a nice piece and signed it. And then on the back of it, it's like, oh, and when you get hungry for some Frontera food, but it's not available to you, here's a guacamole recipe. That's the way that we make it in the restaurant. And you can go to your grocery store and buy the ingredients and make it. And remember that we're going to rise from these ashes, and we will welcome you one day back into our restaurants. But realizing that we are way more than just a feeding place, that we are a place that people come for a full experience, and that includes welcoming and music and art on the walls and all that sort of stuff. And so that's what we did. That was our big pivot.
That's amazing. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, it's in contrast, we didn't have we can't take credit for a really impressive pivot on our side. We really saw that the opportunity was, or that the only thing we could do was try to keep up. We were losing drivers left and right, and we had to keep up with the demand. And so what we were really trying to do was staff up as best we can, and really ended up being people working longer hours. So our pivot in a way was holding tight and making it through those first really 6 to 10 weeks where people were out left and right, and sometimes sick, and sometimes for fear of the virus. And ultimately we did pretty quickly adopt a wholesale to home program. That was what I think would be the more favorable answer for me to say is that we built this wholesale to home program and started to deliver to some homes, but that didn't ever really take off. And so that's really the story for our first 12, 18 weeks there.
Yeah. Wow. Wild. And Marty, you had quite a bit, because you're dealing with your own farm, you're dealing with your restaurant customers, but you also had these other 60 some farms that you're working with as well.
Yeah. We primarily supplied restaurants for years and years. We went from packing, a crate of 50 pounds of radishes to a restaurant to having to pack and package 51-pound bags of radishes to 50 individuals. And that piece killed our farmers.
Wow.
Want to become that was really the hardest thing. To move away from that, we began a relationship with Matt Wexler, who did our film that Rick was part of too, called Sustainable. Matt watched us struggle, deliver 200 individual orders each week, back of our truck to 3 different locations, and the people stand in line 70 deep or so waiting to pick up their food. And he said, why don't we figure out a way to do an online order system with a curbside pickup? And that they would take the bulk items, break them down, and allow those customers to pick up. So we did. That was like 3 tons of bricks coming off of our backs. It was huge help. And that then allowed us to also begin to reach out to our chef community, who to do we marketing to the same folks that we had been working with as individuals. It's been a huge success. We're really pleased to be able to do that, and it brought some revenue in for some of the smaller restaurants that kept them going.
So in many ways, you kind of became a supply chain partner in the other direction for the restaurants that you're usually delivering to. That's pretty,
Yes.
that's a flip. That's interesting. Now, I think, clearly, and has been a topic of conversation for many, and that's the kind of vulnerabilities to the current food system that were exposed as a result of the pandemic and the supply chain. What do you guys think are the broader implications for kind of business evolution recovery now that we're on the other side of this? Rick, you want to take a crack first?
Well, I think that probably a lot of restaurants are sort of like ours, and having come through this, and we're sort of to the other side of it. I wouldn't say that we're to the other side of it yet, but I think it's going to take another year for us to get fully on the other side of it. But I think that one of the things that we've learned the most was that we can do other things than what we originally set out to do without losing our soul. And that we could still be the same people, but express it in a different way. And we had been expressing it. I mean, that's the other thing, that when you've got a restaurant as old as Frontera, I mean, we're in our 35th year, okay? So in a profession where a 10-year-old restaurant is thought of as old, we're like Methuselah, we're so old. And yet,
but you look great.
People, thank you very much, Michelle. But I think that one of the things that people in our organization didn't know is how resilient we could be. And I think that was some of the fear that we experienced at the beginning of it, because when you've got a 34-year-old, a 34-and-a-half-year-old restaurant, and you're saying, like, is this it for us? Because we're already old, and can we reimagine ourselves as a different entity that still has the same soul? We all came out of it and said, my God, we did a great job. And I think that a lot of restaurants felt like that they were able to, I mean, and we were just like everybody else. We were just barely holding on. And it was like some weeks we would lose money, and then the next week we would break even, and then the next week we would lose money. And so we were going back and forth doing this with a very small staff. But at the end of it, we thought of ourselves as resilient enough to get through it and not lose our way. And it made our staff, and I think everybody on this call or this meeting can say it, is that when you go through that, and I will never doubt the resilience of my team again. I just say, we have to do is get together in a room, and we're going to figure this out, because we have figured out much harder things during the pandemic.
Yeah, indeed. Marty.
Great. Well, one of the interesting things that's happened, I think, because so many people have to seek out better food, we now have relationships with Performance Food Group and Testa Produce, distribute more product to us, and said, we're willing to help move more product for you back to restaurants or wherever, if that would help. And it has made it enable us to provide more product back to restaurants that we couldn't physically serve. So we're seeing some major connections happening across we would not have expected in the previous time.
That's amazing. Powerful implications for your business as you continue to grow as well. Nick, how about you guys?
Yeah, that durability of the shorter supply chain for us was reinforced in a real way, and so one of the compelling conclusions that we saw was we're doing the right thing. Let's ramp it up, and build on this. And those 15 or 20 farm stores that I mentioned that were seeing a lot more traffic during that time, in addition to a lot of other retailers, right? Because all the other kitchens weren't, or many were reduced or closed. The neighbors that were around them were going to those stores more and more and relying on them and building relationships with those farms and like Marty's service, to homes. Those people haven't forgotten the connections that they had, and obviously only weeks out from sort of the end of some of the mask mandates here. But the real question for us is how much of that is going to persist. And as we discussed, I think a lot of it is going to persist, and a lot of it is a fundamental change in how the people who are consumers think about food, and not just from a farm store, but from a restaurant, and just caring more generally about the source of their food. And that's really a cultural change I think we've been seeing for 20 plus years, but I think was accelerated in the last 15 months.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I think, I sense that thread, throughout the conversation, and that is that consumer attitude towards food, right? Plant-based kind of exploded even more over the pandemic. Local food subscriptions to CSAs, all of that jazz. I mean, Rick, you've been in this business since the very beginning of your restaurants, but do we think, Marty, you just kind of spoke to it. I guess I know your thoughts, but what do we think about these consumer attitudes? This kind of, it almost looks like the consumer took a deeper dive into the soul and the real purpose behind what they buy, why they buy it. Do we see this as a pandemic-induced fad, or something that we believe is going to be an acceleration like Marty just explained?
Oh, that's a really hard question, because I don't know what the indications are saying right now. I do know that as people cooked more at home, they appreciated more what we do in our restaurants because they realized that we really are adding something to the value to things. And as they bought just regular commodity stuff in a grocery store, they realized that they were used to eating good quality produce that we bought and used in our cooking in our restaurants. And so I think that they've certainly gotten a taste for it. I hope that there is some real lingering of all of that. It's really weird for a restaurateur to say this, but I feel like that we've gotten so far away from family meals in our homes in this country that the pandemic forced us all to go back to having those. I mean, I've always been a big one to sit down at a table and share food with other people, but I think a lot of people haven't, and I think that they got some new patterns established that perhaps will be long-lasting patterns for their family and then for their kids' families, because they'll remember fondly, I hope, but at least they will remember the power of sitting down with people to eat. And I say that, in our restaurants, we actually have one of the last vestiges of places where people actually sit down, put their cell phones away, and talk to people face to face for like an hour and a half to 2 hours. And so I'm hoping that will be continued in families as well. And that because now people have an understanding of how to get good quality stuff that is perhaps easier for them to get than going to their farmer's market, which I still think they should do. But I think that there's lots of other avenues for getting good stuff for your home. And then they also appreciate a lot of what they get when they come to our restaurants. So my vision for the future is that we will see success in all those areas. that there will be some distribution that will be a little different than pre-pandemic, And that's not going to be bad. We have to rebuild our businesses anyway. I mean, we have to, as restaurant people, we have to rebuild our businesses anyway. And anybody that thinks they're going to go back into the new post-pandemic world exactly like they were before, I think needs to stop and think, because we've all learned lessons. We've all had an opportunity to reflect on things that matter to us during this time. And so now it's like, it's our opportunity to rebuild.
Yeah, and rebuild in a way that acknowledges and recognizes
Right.
this evolved, more food aware,
Absolutely.
more food conscious consumer. Marty, you find the same?
I that get emails from our individual customers, and it's such that we're privileged to be able to access the kind of food that we're providing restaurants. And so we've captured those folks. We continue to look to find ways, like Rick had said earlier, to create an experience, to create an intense food experience that connects with people. Continue to build that out, and as we continue to look what our next iteration is, because I feel like we continue to evolve to be ahead of whatever may be coming. That food experience is going to continue to resonate in our, and to also create a farmer program and help our farmers understand how to create and offer the best product that we can grow. To that end, we may be better than some of what's in the grocery store, but we're not the best yet. And that leaves us to continue to grow.
Yeah, indeed. So I think we have time for one more round, and I can't help but think, and just listening to you guys speak, that there are probably things that you guys did with each of your businesses that you wouldn't have thought of if it wasn't for the pandemic, and obviously it's brought that lens of resiliency that Rick spoke to. Anything that you guys did during the pandemic, any business practice, anything that you ended up doing that you never thought you would do in your business that you would even consider keeping, or that's going to influence the way you move forward as we continue to evolve our way out of this? Rick?
Oh, I've talked about several different things. The idea of creating an experience that a Frontera experience that people can have in their homes. I mean, we even did a Topolo experience, which we're thinking of reviving, where it was a 5-course. We gave you the mise en place to do a 5-course meal, and then a video of how to plate it. And we got great responses on that people could actually have a fine dining meal during the pandemic. So we learned a lot of those kinds of things that we just threw out there to see what would stick on the wall. But I will say that pretty much what we equipped ourselves with during the pandemic was constantly thinking outside the box. And I won't say that we were that great at that before the pandemic. And now I feel like that we think people will throw out crazy ideas in brainstorming sessions that they never would have done before, because they wouldn't have thought it was the path we were on. But now we can be on any path. And we just had a brainstorming right before this session. And we were throwing out all kinds of ideas of how we can be a little bit more diverse in our in where our revenues come into the restaurant. And so we were just having a brainstorming on all the different ways that we could do that, as sort of like giving ourselves a little buffer, especially during this year of rebuilding that's coming now. So that's kind of where we are. I will say our biggest learning, and the things that will continue on, is that we're never gonna, I don't think we've ever rested on our laurels, but we've been down a pretty narrow path, and now our path is quite a bit broader.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's amazing. Thank you for that. Marty.
I think we have been good with Spence Farm and down at the farms at adapt, but I don't. We were always as mid and long-term planning. I think we addressing the moment, and I feel have the space to chart a course more in line with all should go and how we can best serve everyone. And we were just so we need to do this. And in the moment now, we just feel much more adept at making them. That feels really good.
So becoming more strategic rather than building the plane while flying it. So sweet. Nick, how about your business model? Yeah, boat. I like it. I'm a fisherman,
for us,
I take boat. Yeah.
For us, we did do the wholesale to home program. I didn't ever imagine us doing that, where we were bringing, if you wanted to, you and a group of neighbors wanted to do a larger order, we deliver to homes now, and that was kind of a new thing. But the thing I think that I didn't expect that happened is a deepening of our relationships with it forced us to reminded us of the importance of the relationships with our farm partners and with our customers. And there's a pressure because we're in food distribution to scale and to get bigger and bigger, and you kind of lose sight of some of those things, or there's a risk of that. And for us, it really reminded us of what are we doing this for on both sides of the equation. Let's check in with our chef. Let's check in with our grocery store. What do you need? How can we help you? Let's check in with our farm partner. How can we work better together? What's happening at the pickups? So those relationships deepened, and that was a really important reminder over and over again of the significance of that.
That's incredible. That's incredible. It's just I wish we had so much more time than we do. In some of the conversations that we had leading up to the panel, you guys just shared so much. We could have done 2 hours today, but I want to thank each of you guys for everything that you've done. And I think Casey's joining us, and she'd like to welcome us to close out. So Casey, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. So stay tuned till the end, as our presenters will be sharing their one sentence takeaway from this session. But first, we would like to provide some brief instructions for the upcoming networking time. It's sponsored by Aramark. In sessions, you'll find special culinary demonstrations, conversations, and then meet the author booth and panel discussions. Or click into networking on the left for a 4-minute one-on-one video chat. Our icebreaker question for today is, what steps are you or your company taking to reduce your carbon footprint? Or you can visit the Innovation Hub to see culinary demos, insightful presentations, and plant-forward innovation inspiration from our generous sponsors. Enjoy today's networking reception activities, and we'll be back on the main stage tomorrow for our next general session at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. So let's throw it back to our presenters to give us their one sentence takeaway from their conversation today. Marty, would you like to start?
Sure.
Go, Marty.
Or we can throw it to Nick.
Here was
all of us.
Go ahead, Marty.
All right.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Producing equals the space where we can make sure the lead and that allow anyone to fail along the way.
Oh, nice.
Very good. And Nick?
I have increased optimism after this call and the preparatory calls, but also certainly over the last 15 months, I have increased optimism for the success of local and regional supply chains and a greater attention to the sourcing of food and all the pieces that go into it.
All right. And Rick?
Yeah, I'm sort of in the same boat as Marty and Nick in this, that I thought if I was going to summarize it in one sentence, I would say that I have renewed hope that we are building a better future in terms of great food for everyone.
Good. Perfect. Any last comments from Michelle that you'd like to add?
I have a sentence. Life is made of moments, and this was a large one. And it's how we all choose to deal with those moments, both individually and as a broader collaborative group that define us. So I think we're all charged to take the opportunity to define ourselves in ways that can see a brighter, more equitable, more sustainable, more delicious food future for everybody. Thank everybody for participating, for listening to us, for chiming in. Rick, Marty, Nick, Casey, thanks a million.
Indeed. Thank you again to our presenters for a great discussion in this breakout. Looking forward to seeing you all in networking and again for more compelling content tomorrow. Take care. Thank you so much.